as we finished up Unit 9, now we're going to move on to the deadlift. This is the final lift of the meet. So the deadlift is going to be very important for a number of reasons. But one of the things that distinguishes it just a little bit from the squat and the bench press is, I would say even more than those, the setup is so important on the deadlift. The first thing that we want to do here is talk about the actual execution. Then we're going to move into the setup to get you in position to achieve that execution. We'll break down that setup step by step. And then again, we will finally have Dr. Helms come out and give us the command for the deadlift. So the first thing that we want to talk about here is the actual execution of the lift. The execution here is going to be about two things: driving your heels or your feet through the floor and then squeezing your glutes through the movement. Before we do that though, I want you to think about the setup, but keep those two things in mind. Keep driving your heels through the floor and squeezing your glutes through the movement, because we're going to come back and refer to them in just a moment. So, to the setup. Well, if you have the notes in front of you, and everything we talked about in the squat and the bench press is in those notes. But for the deadlift, there is an additional sheet. On that sheet, you have a skeleton, and that skeleton will show three things in line: the scapula, the bar, and your midfoot. So when we set up, our goal is to achieve those three things in line. We're going to show one specific way to set up, and that will help get you there every time. Truly, it doesn't matter how you get to that position as long as you get there. If you like to get there another way, go for it. If you have a lifter who doesn't respond to the method that I'm teaching now, go for that other way. I will actually give a few examples where the method that I'm teaching won't work and you'll have to make some adjustments. But those adjustments will allow them to get to the position where the scapula, the middle of the foot, and the bar are all in the same line. So let's get to it, then we'll troubleshoot, and then we'll work back to how we can do the 2 points of execution, which, as I'm sure you remember, are driving your heels through the floor and squeezing your glutes through the movement. So to set up on the deadlift, since we're talking about driving the heels through the floor as the first part of the execution, our goal is to put ourselves in a position with our stance where we can apply the most amount of force to the ground. That is a vertical jump width. So as I approach the barbell, each and every time I deadlift, I'll almost do a mock vertical jump. Right? Now I do that because I'm very familiar with it, because I can dunk a basketball all day. But as I do that vertical jump width, I know that's about the width my stance is going to be. Nobody's going to be out here when they're doing a vertical jump. So why would you want to be out here when you deadlift, where you can apply less force to the ground? So I approach the barbell. I do that mock jump. I know that's about where my stance is going to be. Now remember, what are the three things that you should have in line? You should have in line your scapula, you should have in line the bar, and you should have in line the middle of your foot. So where do I place the bar? The bar splits the middle of my foot. The bar will not move, right, forward or backward from this position until it comes off the floor. Hopefully then it's in a perfectly straight line, although unlikely. So the bar is splitting the middle of my foot. I think you should also keep in mind, this is not the middle of your foot that you can see. This is the middle of your entire foot. This is typically about on the knot of your shoelace. Now, I currently have only socks on. Deadlift shoes would be flat. Squat shoes have a heel, as we would see. I did this for a reason. If for some reason you don't have flat deadlift shoes, don't squat in running shoes, or excuse me, don't deadlift in running shoes, don't deadlift in squat shoes. I would prefer that you you deadlift in your barefoot or in your socks. So if you're looking from the side, you can see the bar is in the middle of my entire foot, not just the middle of foot that I can see. That's on the top of the knot of my shoelace if I were wearing shoes. So as we do this now, my next thing is to grab the bar without lowering my hips. Am I in position to deadlift? I'm not in position to deadlift, just as on the walkout on the squat. In the commercial gym example, you're calling the hospital at the moment if I deadlift. From here, I'm bending my knees until my shins touch the bar. Still in hospital mode and not in position to deadlift. Now, I need to get those things in line. I need to get the middle of my foot and the bar in line with my mid-scap. So to do this, I'm going to expand my chest, right? I'm not really going to do a full retraction of the shoulder blades, but I'm going to expand my chest. Then I'm going to pull the slack out of the bar. What's the slack? If you feel this, that movement is the slack. You want to pull it tight. We'll explain why in a moment. Expand your chest, big breath, pull the slack. Now, if you're looking from the lateral view, you can see the middle of my foot, the middle of the bar, and my scapula are in line. Big breath, drive my heels through the floor. Bar comes up, squeeze the glutes through the movement. So you can see the bar is moving in as straight of a line as possible, right? Now, let's talk about why we did what we did for a few reasons. Well, we pull the slack out of the bar. Why? Let's get into our setup. If we don't do that, and I don't pull the slack and I just expand, I'm in position, but what happens when I pull? I come forward, and then the bar comes up. It's actually causing two different motions. It's one, throwing me out of position, increasing the risk of injury because now I have to pull back on the bar, right? But it's just simply not an efficient way to deadlift. So you want to pull the bar tight so you can pop that bar off the ground in one clean motion. Now, why have we been so adamant about having our mid-scapula over the bar and over our midfoot? Well, the reason being, biomechanically, the bar simply won't come off the ground until the scapula is over the bar. Let's take a look at this. So again, I set up, just talk through it, bar splits the middle of my foot. I'm here, I grab the bar without lowering my hips, bend my knees so my shins touch the bar. Now, let's say I'm here, my scapula is over the bar. I'm going to over front of the bar, I should say. I'm going to try to initiate the deadlift. Watch what happens. I come back, and then the bar comes up. I'm going to drop my hips too low, what some people might call squatting their deadlifts. I'm here. Now I begin to initiate the lift. I come forward, and then the bar comes up. If you notice, there's a correction. Your body will correct for this, especially you can see it from the lateral aspect. The bar will not come off the ground until your scapula is over the bar. That's why we set up the way we do. Why waste motion? Why increase injury risk if we can set up that way from the beginning and then execute the lift? A few more things that I want to cover. What I'd like to look at is troubleshooting on the deadlift. So for troubleshooting on the deadlift, as we said at the outset, that setup won't work that way for every single person. Sometimes you're going to have an issue where somebody tries that and they're still out in front of the bar. This could be somebody that's a taller lifter. If somebody's a taller lifter and they have longer femurs, they might have to have their stance out a little wider, especially if they have longer arms. You might see this as well. So to do that, if they have a stance just a little bit wider, I want you to notice even with me. If I have this, I'm out in front of the bar, but notice immediately, before I even kind of retract or expand my chest, if I bring my arms out wider, if you're looking from the lateral aspect, you can see me back more. Here's my hands in, here's my hands out. I'm back. Now I'm here. I personally don't need to do that. That wouldn't be a good decision for me. But if you're somebody that sets up the way we talked about and you're forward on the bar, well, what's going to happen to your weight distribution? Your weight distribution is going to be more toward your toes instead of your heels. Right? You're also not going to have your mid-scap over the bar. But if you immediately bring your hands out, right, rather than being here and coming forward, I can bring my hands out and I can come here, be upright, and get into that position. Again, might look a little awkward on myself because it's not necessary for me. But for some people, if they set up the way that we've decided to here, it won't quite work. So I want to now go through everything again. And then I want to talk about the execution and the setup, which we said was driving your heels through the floor and squeezing your glutes through the movement. One of the common mistakes that doesn't allow for that execution to be done too well is that people will, quote, blend the steps that we just said. These steps should be done methodically. Remember, a squat walkout was methodical. A bench setup was methodical. We weren't rushing anything. The reason that we talked through the deadlift in those distinctly different steps is because they're supposed to be done independent of each other. When you blend them, that's when you put yourself in a poor position. So let's do something incorrectly and then we'll correct it. So the bar splits the middle of my foot, okay? Now I'm bending over. It's without lowering my hips, trying to keep my knees somewhat straight. I do that. Now, the steps from here, independent of each other, are supposed to be to bend your knees so your shins touch the bar, and then to expand your chest, pull the slack, and breathe. However, here's what I'll commonly see at first. That's a blending of the steps. People will rush that. They're trying to touch their knees and put themselves in position. I could feel myself when I did that. I had a little counter movement off the floor, the bar got out in front of me, and then I had to recover. Again, if you can do that and you can keep yourself in a perfect position every time, go for it. However, I think when teaching, especially at the beginner or intermediate level, teaching it this way allows people to replicate the setup each and every time. Once they get more advanced, if they feel good doing that and they can stay in the same position, that's okay. It's like this setup is a prerequisite. However, it's an excellent way to teach to ensure things can be replicated time and time again. That's such a big thing in skill acquisition. Remember, we've been using that term, a skill, not just a lift, but a skill. If you change one thing in your skill, it might not feel great immediately, but over time it will feel much better. So it's about sticking with it and practicing it. If you want to practice a skill in the deadlift and you set up with the steps independently of each other, you'll be much better over time. Now let's talk about the execution again. So let's say we do everything correctly. We have the bar split the middle of our foot, our stance is about vertical jump width, our toes, which we haven't mentioned yet, are about at 11 and 1 on the clock. I'm grabbing the bar just on the knurling, right? Not too close. If I'm too close, then at the top, I'm going to grab the bar inside of the knurling as close as I can. If I'm too close from the lateral aspect, look at my shoulders, right? Whereas if I'm outside, my shoulders are back. You'll get red lights if you have too close and you're here. Trust me, it's happened to me before, right? So I'm speaking from experience on that aspect. But the execution of the squat, well, we set up, grab the bar just on the knurling, bend the knees so our shins touch, take a big breath, expand your chest, pull the slack. From here, heels, arms are hooks, arms are straight. At the knees, glutes. If you're not using that power of your hips and your glutes to finish the movement, and you try it, and that bar stays on your shins as close to your body as possible, you should notice once you implement that, the movement should feel a little bit shorter. If you've decreased range of motion on the deadlift, you're more efficient, and you should translate into greater strength almost immediately just by causing that efficiency increase. Right? So that's something else that we want to look for. So we set up to achieve that position. If we achieve that position, that puts us in a much better position to execute the lift as we go through the range of motion. If you're a sumo deadlifter, which isn't the goal that we're teaching here today, however, the positioning that you want to achieve on the setup is the same. The middle of the foot, the bar, and your mid-scap. So when you do that, you could set up the same way, although there's a number of other ways to set up. When you do that, remember, however you set up for that lift, the goal is to get that same three things in line. It's going to look drastically different, obviously, because your hands will be inside of your feet. But you're still looking for those three things to be in line. Remember to troubleshoot with your lifters if their arms are longer and their stance is wider. You might then bring their arms out. Remember, when your arms are out, that's immediately going to bring you back more and should help to place your scapula over the bar. One more thing we need to talk about here before we finally finish up is to go ahead and say, hey, how are we going to breathe on the deadlift? So if we set up independently of each other, now, again, simultaneously as we expand our chest, pull our slack, and we breathe, here's what you're looking for. The same thing on the squat. Into your gut, they're pushing out against your belt. So if you're doing that, the load is light, so I can really accentuate this here. But watch when I breathe. You should see the bar start to pop off the ground. I'm not trying to move the bar off the ground necessarily yet with my heels. I'm doing that simultaneously as I'm breathing. But doing that will pop the bar up, pushing that force into it. It won't pop off the ground, obviously, with 200 kilos, at least not for me. But if you're doing that, that should help give you a little extra to increase your speed of the movement off the ground. The closer your stance, just like a squat and conventional deadlift, the faster the barbell will be off the ground. A wider stance with sumo, the slower the barbell will be off the ground, but your range of motion will be shorter, and you'll be able to lock out the lift very easily, or for the most part, easily, if you get that bar off the ground. So, which stance is right for you? You're going to have to try them out. Depending on your leverages, see what you can do with each, but most importantly, see what you can get in a comfortable position with and what's going to be safest for your structure. So one more time, as we finish up, make sure you get that deadlift setup down. Your mid-scap, the middle of the bar, the middle of your foot should all be in line. When you set up, do those steps in distinctly different motions. If you blend them, right? If you blend them, you might not be in the right position. I urge you to take video on all three of the lifts. Just as I'm filming this, I can watch this back and see my technique. So when you do this, take those notes to the gym with you, film it, and take a look. If you're doing something wrong or it doesn't feel right, you should be able to refer to the notes and find it in the video. Very lastly, in Unit 9, Dr. Helms is going to come back out and give us a command for the deadlift. On the deadlift, there's only one command. You start on your own volition. Once Eric tells me that the bar is loaded, I will start as I please. I'll have 1 minute to do that, and then the only command will be down. Eric, let me know when the bar is loaded.
Bar's loaded.
See you in Unit 10, last one of the module.